All rights reserved. With Yolanda Taylor, the community lawyer on Choice FM.
Welcome to another episode of All Rights Reserved with Yolanda Taylor, the community lawyer. It is such an honor. I don't know if I said this before in my past two episodes, but it's an honor to be a part of the People Station, Choice FM 92.10, and to be able to bring you, everything involving politics, cultural activities, hot trends, but most important, let's not forget about those rights. That's what we're all about. So, as you know, I love to kick off several topics in the area of democracy, politics, housing, restorative justice, and current trends. But I'm not going to do this in any particular order. I'm just going to flow tonight. So, let's start talking about the topic of water. Let's talk about water, y'all. What do I mean water? I'm not talking about whatever her name was, Debbie, tropical depression Debbie, even though there was a lot of water. But to be honest, I don't know about you all, especially you all living in Wilson County, I was more concerned about the tornadoes than I was about the water, right? So, but we do know that natural disasters bring a lot of water. But I'm not talking about that type of water. I'm talking about H2O. I'm talking about drinking water, right? The water that we drink every day and how that relates to democracy and us as a people, how we need to be aware of these issues, right? A lot of times we get crunk, or we get, you can tell I'm telling my age, crunk, we get hype, we get upset when something becomes a crisis. But how can we, as a community and a people, begin to understand these issues and move and act before something becomes a crisis? So let's talk about Flint, Michigan. I know we all have heard about the Flint, Michigan crisis, where people were getting sick, they were getting rashes, their elected officials were not listening to them. So they joined together, with community groups, community activists, churches, and then they brought scientists in later, engineers in later, and they discovered it was a failing water system that uploaded lead into their drinking water, lead that not only affected them, but their children. So we're talking about generations of children and our next generation and so on being impacted by lead poisoning because of the water being unclean. So because of the advocacy and the national headlines and the media attention that was brought to this issue, it came to light that there's been a failure by government to take action. In fact, during the Flint crisis, the Michigan Civil Rights Commission, which is a state-established body, concluded that the poor governmental response to the Flint crisis was a result of systemic racism. Okay? So Flint, Michigan is not enough. Let's look at Jackson, Mississippi. Because after that, there was an issue in Jackson, Mississippi, where folks were told that they had to boil their water. Why? Because the drinking water was unsafe. Why? Because there was a decades-long dismissal of the fact that there was an aging water system that failed there as well. So again, people had to organize, right? In the face of a crisis to be able to assert their rights. And that's what I'm talking about. Our rights, our basic rights to have clean drinking water. Water that will not harm us or impact, maybe, you can be pregnant and you can have a miscarriage because maybe you drunk something in the water that harmed your unborn baby. Or maybe you could be, a child that's developing and you're drinking water with lead, So these are rights that we should protect and that we should be concerned with, even outside of a crisis. It should never take a crisis to move us to action. So I know I talked about Flint and I talked about Jackson, Mississippi, but let's talk about right in Wilson County. Let's talk about Lacoma. I want to say a few years ago, maybe about 5 years ago, I was reading local news around the drinking problems in Lacoma, North Carolina, which is a small town located in eastern North Carolina, Wilson County. Decades, again, or years and years of discolored water plagued the residents right in eastern North Carolina in Lacoma. Can y'all believe that? And they actually, organized themselves. They went to their local commissioner public meetings, and they talked about how they lived there 20 years, how they lived there 9 years, and the water always had a smell. it was always discolored. And, the commissioners seemed ignored, some of them, not all of them, but there were news stories in which some of these commissioners were upset that people were upset about their right to have clean drinking water. And what was going on again? Again, the infrastructure, the particular local water systems that they had in Lucama were failing. And so, but because of the crisis and because of the community concern and outrage and the continuous right of the people to speak up and hold their elected officials accountable, they finally was able to do something about the water in Lucama. And it's my understanding that, some of the comments made by the people that attended these commissioner meetings, they were saying things like, we had brown water when I first came here, and I've been living here for 27 years, and they told me, don't be concerned about the rust that was getting in my clothes from washing in this contaminated water. Use some stain out remover. I mean, can you believe that you're concerned about your basic right to drink healthy, clean water, and your elected officials are telling you to use stain remover to remove the rust stains out of your clothes? And one resident said, every once in a while, the water will clear up. At certain times of the day, maybe you can get clear water. But when a lot of people are using it, it stirs it again and it gets brown again. And she said, I wanted to come here. I wanted to exercise my right to democracy to let you know that you guys have claimed to work on this issue for several years, and it still has not been resolved. So this is an example of what we should do. So water, y'all. Water is a basic right that we're not going to leave on the table. And even though you might be drinking water that's clear as this purified water in this bottle, let me tell you of an issue, a broader issue, a statewide issue, maybe even a national issue involving a man-made chemical called PFAS. Have y'all ever heard of PFAS? Well, PFAS is the easier way to pronounce it. It stands for per polyfluoroalkyl substances. That's why I say PFAS. That's why everybody says PFAS. But PFAS is a man-made chemical. It can be found in consumer products like non-stick cookware. When I first learned this, I'm like, I'm going to have to throw away all my non-cook stickware. I thought I was cooking right, by having non-stick cookware. But this chemical, this man-made chemical, can be found in this type of cookware. It could be found in pizza boxes. You order out pizza, it's in those boxes. Fast food containers, like maybe I don't want to name a particular fast food restaurant, but you know the containers that fast food is wrapped in and contained in. It can be found there. But these chemicals, and also stain repellents too, like if you ever using stain repellents, it could be found there. But these are called or nicknamed forever chemicals. Why are PFAS named forever chemicals? It's named forever chemicals because they do not break down. I mean, and they can accumulate in the environment over time, and not just in wastewater. Research has shown that it can come from rainwater. One research estimated that as the air falls back to earth in rainwater, some of these chemicals are often carried to the groundwater miles from the source. Now, statewide, a lot of people who do this work around environmental justice issues and PFAS work and contaminated water work, they know that, the Cape Fear River, in southeastern North Carolina, the Cape Fear River is known to be contaminated with PFAS because of the plants and the corporations that spill this chemical into the wastewater. But hey, a body of water is connected, right? So even though that's in eastern North Carolina, I think if you live in Wilson County, if you live, in Wake County, I mean, you need to be concerned about how that water is flowing upstream. So there are a lot of things that, our government does not know yet about PFAS. researchers at the Environmental Protection Agency, I'm talking about the federal agency, the Environmental Protection Agency, are partnering across the country. They're partnering with groups and advocates across the country, and they're working hard to resolve some of these questions. They want to know how to better detect, PFAS, how to measure it in the air, in the water. Again, it could be in the soil, it could be in fish, it could be in wildlife, but again, it could be in everyday consumer products that you're using. It could be in carpet, especially carpet that is used in low-income housing. So again, is this systemic racism when we look at the race wealth gap in America, and we look at who are those folks who can afford or not afford, quality housing, or have to live in low income subsidized housing? Are they installing carpet that contains PFAS? And I'm not trying to scare anyone. I just think it's important that you are aware of these issues, and maybe you should rethink using non-stick cookware. Maybe you should go back to the old skillet pans that grandma, used to use. I mean, those are healthier than, and they're heavy too. They're healthier than non-stick cookware if you're concerned about PFAS or this forever chemical. Some cancers have been linked to PFAS. I had an opportunity to participate and give public comments to the Environmental Protection Agency, I want to say maybe about 2 or so years ago, and there were so many people there talking about cancer and how they believe their cancer is linked to PFAS. And I'm sure there are some unknown issues, right? One issue that may impact some current day concerns that we have around our health is that PFAS has been determined to impact the way your body responds to vaccines. So what if we're getting a vaccine to protect us from COVID or the flu or some other contagious disease, but because we got, unhealthy amounts of PFAS in our bloodstreams, we're not responding like we should to vaccines. So, this stuff is long reaching, and you need to be aware of it, and you need to be aware of the Environmental Protection Agency, which is the federal agency, but you also need to be aware of the local agencies here. The North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality, is doing some work as well as around PFAS. And there was a recent community event in front of the General Assembly, I believe, where some environmental advocates were discussing this issue and wanting to have input and voice from the community in what we do as a state to address this issue. But even deeper than that, I wanted to say that there is something new that has occurred on the federal level as it relates to PFAS. The federal government recently, for the first time, decided to take some proactive remedial measures that limit the amount of PFAS that could be in drinking water. Some people think the limits don't go far enough, but this is an issue. So I wanted you guys to be aware of water, y'all. What are we drinking? Locally, do we have discolored water? Do we have water that smells? Statewide, we should be aware of PFAS and how that impacts our body and our immune responses to vaccines and all of that. This is an environmental justice issue, and this is a systemic racism issue in America because it disproportionately impacts our community. So be aware. All right, so I guess I'm going to take a break right now, and I'm going to come back and I'm going to flow with some more important topics. See you soon.
All rights reserved with Yolanda Taylor. Tuesdays at 5 on Choice.
Before we went to break, I was talking about water, y'all. Water. Not the song you just heard, but water, y'all. And drinking water. And while we as a community, we should be concerned about the water that we're consuming in our bodies. And I know a lot of us, we drink bottled water. Maybe all bottled water is not equal. So maybe we should be concerned about bottled water. But we definitely should be concerned about the water that's coming out of our faucet that's unfiltered. And I was talking about PFAS, and I want to say this, regardless of what filtering system you have, it's my understanding that even filtering systems are not equipped at this time to protect you from PFAS. So if you're just joining us, PFAS is a man-made chemical, And it's nicknamed the forever chemical because it never breaks down and is in our body. And one of the most contaminated bodies or rivers in North Carolina is the Cape Fear River. And I was just talking about how, regardless of where you live in the state, you need to be concerned about that because bodies of water flow into one another. So if you're in eastern North Carolina, Rocky Mount, Wilson, any of the eastern counties, Husky, definitely the triangle, we all should be concerned. And I also was just saying that we also should be concerned about the consumer products that we're using because PFAS is found in a lot of fast food wrappings and containers, carpet that's usually installed in low income subsidized housing. And we should be concerned because in our bodies, research has shown that certain levels of PFAS, as I stated before the break, can be linked to cancer. But in addition to that, it can decrease fertility. It can increase your blood pressure, especially in pregnant women. There could be developmental or delays in children, including low birth weight and things like that. And one of the important things that research has found is that it can also affect our immune responses to vaccines. So this is something that we should be concerned about. And one of the notes that I wanted to share before break was that on April 10th, 2024, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency finalized what's called the maximum contaminant level for 6 PFAS compounds, right? This includes a limit of 4.0 parts per trillion each, and this is getting technical. The bottom line is they're trying to put caps on the amount and the levels of PFAS that should be in drinking water. So that's a start, but some people are concerned because they feel like it doesn't go far enough. We want to eliminate PFAS, if we can, from our drinking water because of the negative impacts it has in our bodies. So talking about reproductive health and how PFAS impacts, reproductive health and delays in child weight or delays in birth, or it could cause maybe a miscarriage. Flowing right into politics, y'all. Reproductive health. Should it be a political issue, or should this just be a health issue between a woman and her doctor? That's a debate, and that's an electoral issue that's on everyone's ballot. Depending on who you vote for, will determine whether or not you get less reproductive rights or more. We all know that the Supreme Court overturned a decades-long standing precedent case, Roe v. Wade, right? And it basically said it's up to the states to determine a woman's right to an abortion. And a lot of people look at this differently. Some people will say, and I know in our community, there are a lot of people in our community who are pro-life, right? But there are also a lot of people in our community who are pro-choice. There are people in our community who may be pro-life personally, but still feel like other people have their right to choose what they want to do. But the majority of all doctors, regardless of politics, really see this as a health issue. I know when I was pregnant, I certainly saw it as a health issue. I mean, I really felt disabled. There were some health challenges I faced because I was pregnant, It wasn't just about the life of my unborn baby. It was also about my life and being able to make it, to labor. But I wanted to talk about how recently the current administration, the Biden administration, recently stated that hospitals must offer abortions when needed to save a woman's life, despite state bans enacted after the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, or our constitutional right to an abortion, which happened about 2 years ago. However, of course, there's going to be a state that's going to challenge the administration. So Texas is currently challenging that guidance. And earlier this summer, the Supreme Court said we're out of it. They did what they did. They overturned it. They left it to the states. And now they're like, we're out of it. We don't want to resolve the issue. So maybe that's a good thing that the Supreme Court is now out of it. I mean, they've done enough damage already as it relates to our reproductive health. But when you think about this, what if your life is in danger? What if you're miscarriaging and you present yourself to the doctor? That could be an involuntary abortion, right? It's not something that you're trying to do, but you're bleeding profusely and you present yourself, at a doctor's office. And I don't know if this has ever happened to someone you love, a woman you know, or if you're a woman that this has happened to you. to be personal with you, to take the lawyer hat off, I'm going to share a story that happened with me. And I still don't know what happened because there was a lack of empathy I felt and a lack of care and concern when I was almost 9 months pregnant. And all of a sudden, out the blue, I just started having this like bleeding, profusely. So of course, being almost, well, maybe I was in my second trimester, being that late in my pregnancy, of course I'm concerned about my unborn baby because I wanted to have her. Went to the doctor and they basically was like, there's nothing we can do. So basically when you're miscarriaging or you're are having this issue, doctors usually don't even really address it because they're like, there's nothing we can do at this point, right? We'll check you afterwards to see if it was a miscarriage, but there's nothing we can do to save the baby. Well, what about save me? Because there are stories that more than 100 pregnant women in medical distress who sought help from emergency rooms were turned away or negligently treated since 2022. And this was an article in the Associated Press, and this is part of a federal investigation of hospitals and how women are being turned away. And when you think about health equity and how doctors treat us, like if they don't look like us, if they're not from our community, if they don't understand us, we know like people like Serena Williams, who's wealthy. She even has her own personal health story of how she was treated when she was in pain. Doctors had implicit biases around Black women's pain and our ability to be in pain. I mean that is really deep. So you are, again, we're talking about reproductive health, but we're also talking about health equity. We're talking about reproductive justice when it comes to our communities and when it comes down to Black women or women of color or indigenous women, right? What is reproductive justice? Reproductive justice is deeper than just a right to abortion. It's about our health. It's about the alarming rates of I guess, miscarriages that Black women have, the amount of alarming rates that we can die from pregnancy. So these are some things that you should think about. And I know this sounds a little deep, but this is politics. And again, I talked last week about why state courts matter. Well, why courts matter, period. The North Carolina Supreme Court overturned a case that had precedent and said that there's no constitutional right to an abortion. So now states are deciding that. So what does that mean? State courts, again, are deciding that. Your legislators are deciding that because North Carolina has already made some changes and implemented a 12-week ban, around abortions in this state, and other states like Texas, Iowa, and other places are even doing harsher or more restrictive things. But again, when we present to an emergency room and we're having an involuntary abortion or miscarriage, doctors should do more than say we can't do anything about it. You deserve to have immediate treatment. These are your rights. You should advocate for yourself. Don't be afraid because it's a doctor and you think they have more education than you. This is your life. This is the life of your child. If you seek to, have your baby, these are your rights that you should feel empowered to advocate for. Because if you don't advocate for yourself, no one else is going to advocate for you, especially when it's between you and a healthcare provider. And it's always important that you find a doctor that's compassionate and that cares about you and your issue. So that was deep, y'all, talking about reproductive health, but it is important because, again, it ties into democracy, it ties into elections, who are we voting for, who are we putting on our highest court, the North Carolina Supreme Court, who we're electing in our General Assembly. If you're feeling like, I don't even want to vote, I don't feel like it impacts my day-to-day life, I'm telling you it does. It impacts the water you're drinking. It impacts your health if you're a woman and you are a loved one of a woman that you care about. And, in this country, as rich as it is, no woman should be dying, because of a miscarriage or dying because she's having an involuntary abortion or need assistance because she's in medical distress. So, again, I next topic and that I'm going to talk about, I always talk about housing. So let's flow into housing. All this dovetails again. It's all connected because I feel deeply that where you live matters. Where you live determines your access to good doctors and hospitals. So that's a connection. Where you live determines whether or not you have clean drinking water. So we talked about that too. And where you live determines whether or not you have people who have been elected to advocate and champion your issues. So where you live matters. It's more than a cost. It's all about these other systems like education. Housing sits at the heart of a system of multiple institutions that can reproduce what I call inequity. And what is inequity? Inequity is just another word for unfairness, right? Unfairness in your life. So remember that. So let's talk about housing. Last week, I talked about homelessness. Well, the first episode, I talked about homelessness and the increase in homelessness in our communities, encampments. I talked about how the U.S. Supreme Court had a case out there where they said that you can remove these homeless encampments. The last episode, I talked about how the federal government's attempt to cut interest rates, which we anticipate will happen, how that has an indirect impact on mortgage rates and how that can decrease mortgage rates. We've seen a fall in mortgage rates, which has made it easier for those who want to buy a home to buy a home. How does that affect you if you're a renter? Well, currently, the wealthy people or those who are maybe income or middle class who could possibly purchase a home have not been able to. So it's created a bottleneck of sorts in the rental market. They're taking up a house or a rental unit that you can be renting because they can't move out of their apartment and move into a house. So it's a good thing that the mortgage rates are falling down because data suggests that in Raleigh, the majority of renters today are wealthy renters. Some of these people are renting because they don't want to rent or because they can't afford to buy a house or they can't afford the down payment or the cost of a mortgage. Some are just wealthy and they just rather rent than to buy, and that's okay. But it's all connected. It's all really connected. So just know how everything's connected. The fact that someone cannot buy a house could impact your ability to be able to rent. Because as long as luxury renters are taking up all the rental units in the city or where you live, that's going to keep the price high. Because why will a landlord lower the rent when someone's willing to pay $3,000 a month for a 2-bedroom apartment or over $1,000 a month for a studio? A landlord's not going to do that. They're going to do what the market will allow them to do. And wealthy renters don't have a problem with that, right? They don't have a problem paying that amount. But then, you see that those of us who can only afford, $800 for a studio, can't enter the rental system because of that bottleneck effect. So it's a great thing that mortgage rates are coming down, and hopefully they will continue to drop. But one thing I want you all to be aware of, and this is happening in Eastern North Carolina, I know it's happening in Rocky Mount, I'm sure it's going to be happening in Wilson and other towns that are especially close to the triangle, and that is the topic of ADUs. What is an ADU? An ADU is an acronym for accessory dwelling unit. What is a accessory dwelling unit? An accessory dwelling unit is AKA granny flat. What's a granny flat? That's something that the rich use, right? Oh, it's a place where my mother-in-law can live. It's not connected. It's not in my house. It's out back. It's a living structure that's on your land where your home is, but it's out back in the backyard. It could be an old storage shed that you rehab and you revitalize into a living space. It could be a garage and you are fortunate enough to create a bedroom on top of the garage, but it's called a ADU. So when you hear that term, let's talk about whether or not we as a people and whether or not our community can access these new ordinances or can benefit, I should say, from these new ordinances like the city of Raleigh has passed and that Rocky Mount is set to do as well. And why are cities passing ordinances that will allow for the building of accessory dwelling units? They're doing it because they feel like it's a solution to the housing problem. They feel like the more housing you build, that solves homelessness, right? But let's really examine the fairness and the equity around accessory dwelling units. How many of us, have a home where we have another home in the back? How many of us have that in our communities? Or if we do have an old structure in our backyard, how many of us have access to capital where we can actually rehab or revitalize that old structure and create an affordable unit for a loved one to live in? Because the whole thought process behind this is that you can rent it out to someone who's low income. And that could be, additional revenue for you if you own a home or you have a mortgage. You can have rental property in your backyard and you can rent it to someone, that in your family or loved one or maybe even a stranger who needs low income housing. And these units are usually like tiny homes. They're small. So, and like I said, it's connected on your land. It's just an extension of your home. So those are some of the issues. We see these ordinances being passed, but then I like to think deeply about, okay, well, who's going to benefit? Will the rich be the ones to benefit from this ordinance? How is that going to help low-income people? Because, are the rich going to, rent their ADUs to low-income people? Maybe some bleeding heart progressive might. I don't know, but I don't think so. It might be like for their mother-in-law, for their guest house, for, when people come stay with them. But we need to think about, okay, well, Rocky Mount has an accessory dwelling unit ordinance. I was fortunate to work with a community group in Rocky Mount around how that will look. And so it's shaping up, and you best believe it's going to be a chess piece on the chessboard as it relates to how Rocky Mount, how Wilson, how eastern towns and cities that are beginning to feel some of that growth from the triangle occur in their own town limits. This is an important, blueprint for building more housing. But one of the issues also with accessory dwelling units is that, the city of Raleigh, for example, allows short-term rentals. So when you think of short-term rentals, what is that? Airbnb? So is it for low-income housing or is it for commercial activities? That's the question. So some people are against it because they're like, this is not really going to be a total solution for low-income housing because, one, those who really need it, are they going to really have access to someone who has an accessory dwelling unit in their backyard and who will actually rent to them? The other thing, too, is that if it's going to be a Airbnb, which a lot of people are for because, as you can tell, it's a revenue-generating source, and some people are about the money. But if you have temporary transit people throwing parties, having the time of their lives, coming in for, I don't know, what's the concert? The J. Cole concert, the Dreamville concert, coming in for Dreamville, and they're looking for an Airbnb. Who's that helping? Is that helping us? Is it really helping us? Or is it helping, the wealthy again? So reason why I'm getting into this is because these are local policies that are moving in your cities. Again, Wilson, Rocky Mount, I've looked at some of the plans. ADUs are an option there. And like I said, Goldsboro probably, Greenville probably, all these areas, that are seeing an increase in growth, that are seeing an increase in development. ADUs are a talking point. So you should be aware and you should determine, well, what about our communities? How will our communities be able to access this benefit so that we can provide a loved one or someone we know with affordable housing? So I thought that was a great topic, that we were able to talk about that, don't you? Again, we're talking about our rights, and we want all rights reserved. And so I'm going to take another break, and I will be right back. See you soon.
All rights reserved with Yolanda Taylor, the community lawyer, on Choice FM.
Hey everyone, we are back. For those of you who are listening to us on the radio, you heard You Won't Break My Soul by Beyonce. And I'm here to say tonight on All Rights Reserved, we're not going to let these injustices break our soul. Why? Because we're listening to be informed, to be engaged, and to take action. right? So I hope you guys learned some great things about ADUs, maybe as a revenue source, and also maybe as an opportunity for your loved ones to have housing. That's what we talked about before the break. For those of you joining us, we talked about accessory dwelling units, aka tiny homes in your backyard that you can use either for a short-term rental, which the city of Raleigh allows in its ordinance, or you can use it to provide a loved one with low-income housing during these dire times. So, moving on to the topic of restorative justice. Last week, I talked about how there's a quote by Malcolm X that states that housing, or land, I should say, land is the basis of all revolution. It's the basis of all liberty, all freedom, and all equality. That's how important land is. If you think about it, when you think about the wars that are currently being fought in the Middle East, it involves land, right? When you think about even how this country was founded, yeah, we read the history books and it's all about, oh, we want our own rights. We want to separate from Great Britain, but Great Britain didn't want the 13 colonies or the land in America to separate from it. So the Revolutionary War and the wars that follow, a lot of these wars have been about land. So, and we have these battles going on in our very communities because we're seeing that land has become a commodity, because it's scarce now, especially if you live in an urban area. It's costly now because property taxes are going up and people are losing land either because it was stolen by just pure theft. And we see that this has happened. We know that this has happened to Native Americans and indigenous communities, but I'm saying it has happened even in our communities where we are learning that land was just taken by the government, maybe through the power of eminent domain. What is eminent domain? It's a law that gives cities and municipalities the right to declare your property blighted, abandoned, vacant. And then that triggers this power for them to take the land, right? And in some instances, like I know in Winston-Salem, I've seen instances where they hold that land and do nothing with it, right? What are they doing? It's called land banking. So let's talk about how cities have stolen land from our communities to hold it for future development for higher income people to move in, because the cities are the puppet master behind a lot of this development, because they're actually shifting the demographics, or that's how they call it, the demographics. When you hear that word, basically demographics are how people are categorized by race, gender, religion, all these categories. But demographics, as far as race, we've seen a shift in the racial makeup of residents in Southeast Raleigh, downtown Raleigh, other areas. And I'm telling you, this population increase that's coming to the east, these are things that you should be having some forward thoughts on. You should be forward thinking about how your city is going to grow. Is it going to be inclusive of you and people who look like you? Or will you be pushed out and further marginalized? Because land is the basis of all revolution, equity, freedom, and justice. So these are things that we should be concerned about. So when we talk about restorative justice, on my first show, I say restorative justice, it isn't reparations. It's like the cousin of reparations, but restorative justice is looking at harm and coming up with solutions, mostly policy solutions, on how we can undo these harms in our community. So we have to identify who's been harmed. Let's talk about a piece of property that's being redeveloped. It's going to be, billions and billions of dollars are going into Ditts Park. Before it was a mental institution, or before it housed a hospital for those who have mental health issues, it belonged to Native Americans. It was also a plantation where formerly enslaved people lived. So now it's about to become this high growth area, and it's going to be surrounded by housing that maybe some people that look like us or from our communities can't even afford. So this land was taken from indigenous people. It was taken, maybe reparations should be given to the formerly enslaved people's ancestors who farmed the plantation, who made it wealthy. But now, again, people who live in and around this area are facing possible displacement just because of the investment of wealth, and I should say the intentional injection of wealth into an area that which the communities around it have been formally classified. I say formally because of all the wealth that's coming now, but these areas and these neighborhoods have always been known to be low income or economically distressed. Not anymore. Not anymore. Once these plans manifest around Ditts Park, yeah, you can go visit the sunflowers. I see a lot of people on Facebook, visiting the sunflower field, taking pictures, doing stuff. That's fine. It's a beautiful field. But just understand the history. Just understand, the stories about this land and how it was taken, right? It was taken. And how it's being redeveloped now for people who can only afford the highest pleasures of life and who can live in an area that's becoming mostly unaffordable for regular middle class, low income people, firefighters, police officers, teachers, sanitation workers, regular people, even people that work in the service industry, like hotels. You'll be able to come to work, but you won't be able to live in the areas where you work as this development continues. So research that, right? And even in Wilson, the stadium that's being built downtown, the luxury homes that are being built downtown. I mentioned before that those same developers are in Rocky Mount. Those same developers are in Rocky Mount. Now, I'm not anti-development. I'm not anti-revitalization, but I am anti-displacement. There is a difference between revitalizing and bettering your community and then but then allowing the market forces to forcibly displace legacy residents who have dedicated their sweat, commitment, resources, hands, labor to a community for generations. And now newcomers come because they're wealthy, it creates this market force that makes the value of land goes up. So that's a restorative justice issue here. Land is going up. Land has been stolen. And who's marginalized again? And what are some solutions? Some solutions are, again, to attend community meetings where they're talking about development. Find out. Listen to your city council meetings. Either on YouTube, because a lot of them are, broadcasted on YouTube, or, listen by going to your city council's website, listen to these meetings. If you're savvy like me, you don't want to look at a video, but you just want to look at the minutes, maybe you can pull the minutes offline. But most importantly, maybe one day you can take time out of your busy schedule and show up if you can. Just listen to what they're doing. Ask questions. You have a right. Talking about all rights reserved. You have a right to ask your elected officials any question you want to ask them. No question is a stupid question, right? The government is for the people, by the people, and this is your opportunity to show and hold them accountable. They are accountable. They're accountable. So that's why voting matters. When you vote and they know you're a voter, they know you're one of their constituents, they know that you're active in the community, then they know that they have to answer to you. That's the way to hold them accountable, not just before the election, but throughout their terms. So let's continue to think about land. Let's continue to think about instances in our community where maybe you had a house and all of a sudden, maybe it was code enforced by the city and the city was able to put a lien on your grandma's property for uncut grass, or because the house was old and it didn't get repaired and they're able to then take that land from you. Those are ways that our land is being taken from us, right? And then it's being given to others to benefit. Those are legacies that we are allowed to slip through our fingers, or legacies that we're losing and not able to pass on to the next generation because of these things. So restorative justice is about undoing the harm, being vocal about it, making certain demands around what should happen and what should be done to restore land. And it's a community conversation that needs to happen. So I wanted to share that. So that was restorative justice. I know that's always deep, but I think it's always important that we stay woke. People don't like that word anymore, woke, but I don't care. Woke means enlighten. We need to remain enlightened about what's going on in our communities. And if you're from Wide Awake Wilson, you definitely need to be awake. You definitely need to be awake and woke. So that was that. Another topic I'm going to land this plane on, and I only have a few minutes to do that, and that is around the issue of scammers. Who are these scammers? Oh my God. My husband was telling me he was at the gas station the other day and a dude tried to give him a fake $20 bill, right? Because apparently the gas station only accepted credit cards. So his scam was, bro, bro, if you can you get me some gas? Because I don't have a credit card, but the bill was obviously fake. So my husband was like, you don't roll up on me like that, bro. I mean, I'm wise. I'm new to this. I'm not new to this. I'm wise to this. If you really want gas, there's a gas station right there. Or, maybe I can, direct you to the closest gas station, but I'm not going to take that fake $20 bill. And he knew the guy was a scammer because the guy said, okay, thank you, bro. And then he went on to the next person. He wasn't even looking for gas. He went on talking to everybody else at the gas station. So, and another thing that brought me to this topic is because I was reading a real sad story about how people are being scammed by crypto machines. I think that's what you call it, crypto ATMs. I hadn't even heard of a crypto ATM, right? Until I read this story. I didn't even know they existed, but they're probably in your town. I know they're in Raleigh because they're everywhere now, right? But these scammers, I'm telling you guys, they are getting so smart and they're getting so wise. They are even disguising themselves as bank officials. They may call you and say they work for the Navy Credit Federal Union, or we work for the State Employees Credit Union. Some of them are even pretending to be sheriffs or deputy sheriffs at Wake County. I mean, they're doing all types of things. And what's the aim? To take your money. To take your money. Scams, for those of us who are like in our late 30s, beyond, those of us who are on Facebook, we know that there are scammers all the time. Every time I comment, happy birthday, happy anniversary, there's someone, check this person out, Yolanda, connect with this person has an opportunity. There are people in my Facebook Messenger trying to scam me. But I'm telling you, we have to be vigilant and we have to be aware because most of the people who are vulnerable to scams are young people and the elderly. So this particular story that I think you should really be concerned about is the crypto ATM machines. Wake County police or FBI investigators have seized like $200,000 worth of money that poor people funded or like put into these crypto ATM machines because they got a call with a made up crisis. Like in one of the stories, a person was called because their Facebook, they got locked out of Facebook. And so they were given a fake number to call to get back into Facebook. And so they were so concerned because they were locked out of Facebook, right? And I think this person created a crisis around, what was going to happen to them, or that they had some pictures of them. But this person bought into it, and they were just saying, well, don't worry about that. The FBI is going to think that these pictures, and I think the story said that there were pictures of child pornography that the person knew that they didn't do or their husband didn't do, but the person on the phone told them that the FBI was going to seize their account. So the best way that they can prevent that was to go to a crypto ATM machine and put in money. And I believe this person put in over $12,000 worth of dollars. Deplete the whole bank account, did that. But as soon as she did it, she realized, oh my God, what if I got scammed? Because the scam was, we'll create a virtual wallet for you. You feed it into the crypto machine. We will create a virtual wallet for you, so you will have access to your money, and it will not be, in your bank that the FBI is about to seize. Why the person fell for that, I don't know. I don't know, but according to Wake County, there's over $200,000 worth of money where everyday people, mostly the elderly, they don't know. They really trust these people. They're saying they're calling from the Wake County Sheriff's Department. They're saying they're calling from Navy Credit Federal Union. They're saying all this and they're pretending to be compassionate and helpful. But the sad thing about this, and this is a conclusion of the story, is that there are no laws to protect people who fall prey to the cryptocurrency ATM machines, right? Because the police seized the money after investigating it, or the FBI did, and because they realized that person had deposited that money, so you would think that the money belongs to the people who put it in there. Wrong. The crypto machine operators got a lawyer, and their lawyers were able to argue that that money belonged to the crypto ATM machines and not the victims who had just inserted their money into the machine. And so, a Wake County judge ruled in favor of the crypto ATM machines and not the victims. So there are no laws to protect people from scams. So that's why we're going to stay woke. We're going to stay vigilant. We're going to be aware of this. We got to talk to our elderly parents, grandparents, and we also got to protect our children. So sad news, guys, but something that we should be aware of, that these scammers, they're not stopping. So tonight has been this great episode. I hope you feel on your rights in which way. And I love to end the show every night by saying that what is power? What is power? Power is the ability to create reality for yourself and for others. That's power, okay? So let's continue to move in power. I'll see you next time.
All rights reserved with Yolanda Taylor, the community lawyer on Choice FM.